The ballroom glittered like spilled champagne beneath crystal chandeliers. Dante Salvatore stood at the top of the marble staircase, a king surveying his empire when he saw her, laughing in another man's arms. Something ancient and possessive uncoiled in his chest. He'd built kingdoms on fear and loyalty, but this woman, his assistant of 6 months, had just become the only thing in the world he couldn't control. And for the first time in his carefully ordered life, he wanted to burn it all down just to keep her. Love teaches us that true strength isn't found in control, but in the courage to be vulnerable with someone who sees all of you, and stays anyway. Please like, share and subscribe. Dante's fingers tightened around his whiskey glass until he thought the crystal might shatter. Elena Marchetti threw her head back, blonde curls cascading down her back as the stranger, tall, dark-suited, far too comfortable, whispered something that made her eyes sparkle with genuine delight. The annual charity gala. His event. His guest list. His carefully curated world where every element existed under his absolute control. His assistant. In another man's arms. The rational part of his mind, the part that had negotiated treaties between warring families and orchestrated million-euro deals without breaking composure, recognized the absurdity of his reaction. Elena Marchetti was his employee. Professional. Competent. She organized his calendar, managed his correspondence, and maintained the pristine facade of his luxury hotel empire with exceptional skill. She was not his property, but the primal part of him, the part his father had cultivated through years of brutal training, the part that recognized threats and eliminated them without hesitation, saw only one truth. Another man was touching what belonged to him. He descended the stairs with predatory grace, each step measured and deliberate. Dignitaries and business associates stepped aside instinctively, recognizing the shift in his demeanor even if they couldn't name it. Power radiated from him like heat from a flame, invisible but unmistakable. At 34, Dante Salvatore controlled half of Milan's underground empire while maintaining the pristine facade of a luxury hotel magnate. His legitimate businesses generated impressive revenue, but it was the shadow operations, the carefully managed territories, the strategic alliances, the enforcement of ancient codes, that formed the foundation of his real power. No one touched what was his. He hadn't realized Elena was his until precisely this moment. Mr. Salvatore. His underboss, Marco Ferretti, materialized beside him like a ghost, scarred face impassive but eyes sharp with understanding. The Russian delegation is asking for a moment of your time. They're concerned about the shipping arrangements. Later. The single word carried the weight of absolute authority. Marco's eyes followed Dante's line of sight to where Elena danced, still laughing, still radiant in an emerald dress that hugged curves Dante had noticed far more often than was appropriate for an employer. Understanding flickered across Marco's weathered features. That's Elena's brother, he said quietly, keeping his voice low enough that only Dante could hear. Alessandro Marchetti. Flew in from London this morning. Investment banker. Clean background, no connections to any families. The relief that crashed through Dante was immediately replaced by a more disturbing realization. He'd been seconds away from starting an international incident over a woman who organized his calendar and brought him coffee with exactly the right amount of sugar. Her brother. He drained his whiskey in one smooth motion, the amber liquid burning down his throat, doing nothing to cool the unfamiliar heat in his chest. Without a word, he turned on his heel and walked out of the ballroom, leaving Marco to handle the Russians and the rest of his carefully orchestrated evening. The cool Milan night air hit him as he stepped onto the terrace, but it did nothing to clear his head. Dante gripped the marble balustrade, staring out at the city lights stretching toward the horizon. A city he owned in ways the politicians and businessmen inside could never comprehend. He'd killed his first man at 19. Assumed control of his father's empire at 25. Spent nearly a decade building something that transcended simple criminality into a complex web of legitimate business, strategic alliances and carefully managed violence. And tonight he'd nearly lost control over a woman dancing with her brother. Unacceptable. The next morning, Elena arrived at the penthouse office at exactly 7:30 as always. Punctuality was one of the many qualities Dante appreciated about her. In the 6 months since he'd hired her, after 3 previous assistants had quit within weeks, unable to handle the demands of his schedule and the occasional glimpse of what lay beneath the businessman veneer, Elena had never been late, never complained, never shown fear. She was remarkable in her composure. Dante was already behind his desk, reading through contracts with the focus that made grown men confess their sins. He'd been there since 5, unable to sleep after the gala, working through acquisition documents and territory reports with mechanical precision. He didn't look up when she entered. "Good morning, Mr. Salvatore." Her voice was professional, warm without being familiar. "The Rossi meeting is at 9. Your lawyer called about the property acquisition. Everything is finalized, just needs your signature. And you have a conference call with the Singapore investors at 2. She set down his espresso, prepared exactly as he preferred it, and turned to leave. Who was he? Elena's hand stilled on the door handle. When she turned back, confusion clouded her features. "Sir. Last night. The man." For a moment she simply stared at him, and Dante forced himself to maintain his expressionless mask even as something desperate clawed inside his chest, demanding answers, demanding reassurance, demanding things he had no right to demand. Understanding dawned in her eyes, followed quickly by something that might have been amusement. "My brother. Posendro. He's visiting from London for a few days." "You didn't mention a brother. You didn't ask." The words hung between them, simple and factual, yet somehow weighted with unspoken meaning. Their eyes met across the expanse of his office. Modern, expensive, designed to intimidate and impress in equal measure. Hers were Hazel, he realized. He'd known that intellectually, had seen her every working day for 6 months, but he'd never really looked before. Hazel with flecks of gold that caught the morning light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. She was defiant in that moment, not backing down from his scrutiny, and something in Dante's chest tightened painfully. "Is there anything else, Mr. Salvatore?" 1,000 questions crowded his tongue. "Are you seeing anyone? Do you think of me outside these walls? Do you feel this thing between us, or am I losing my mind?" "No. That will be all." She left, and Dante stared at the closed door for longer than he'd stared at anything in years, wondering when exactly his carefully controlled world had started spinning off its axis. A few days later, Elena worked late organizing files for an upcoming acquisition. Dante had mentioned, casually as if it meant nothing, that the Moretti deal required meticulous documentation. Every transaction, every transfer, every piece of paperwork needed to be beyond reproach. The family was old school, suspicious of anyone outside their circle, and a single error could collapse negotiations that had taken months to arrange. So Elena had stayed, surrounded by manila folders and legal documents, cross-referencing dates and signatures with patient attention to detail. The penthouse was silent except for the soft rustle of papers and the distant hum of Milan through bulletproof windows. Most of the staff had left hours ago. Even Marco had departed after a brief conversation with Dante behind closed doors. Something about a shipment and a potential problem with the Corsicans. Elena didn't ask about those conversations anymore. She'd learned early that some aspects of Dante's business existed in shadows she wasn't meant to illuminate. She was so focused on her work that she didn't hear him approach. "You're still here." Elena jumped, nearly dropping an entire stack of files. Her heart hammered as she turned to find Dante standing in the doorway of his private quarters, having shed his jacket and tie. His shirt was rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with lean muscle, and his usually immaculate hair was slightly disheveled as if he'd been running his fingers through it. He looked human in a way he rarely did during business hours. "I wanted to finish before tomorrow," she said, trying to calm her racing pulse. "The Moretti documents need to be perfect. You work too much." The irony of the statement, coming from a man who regularly worked 18-hour days, made her laugh. The sound was soft, genuine, filling the space between them with unexpected warmth. "I learned from the best." Something flickered in Dante's dark eyes, pleasure perhaps at the compliment or surprise that she'd offered it. He moved closer, close enough that Elena could smell his cologne, something expensive and understated that suited him perfectly. "You did well at the gala," he said, his voice dropping lower. "Several clients mentioned how impressed they were with your knowledge of the hotel properties." "Thank you. I try to stay informed about all aspects of the business." Dante reached past her for a file on the upper shelf, his arm bracketing her against the desk. The movement was deliberate, Elena realized with a sharp intake of breath. He could have asked her to retrieve it. Could have waited for her to move. Instead, he'd invaded her space, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could count his heartbeats if she pressed her palm to his chest. He retrieved the document with agonizing slowness, his eyes never leaving hers. "This one," he said softly, holding up the file. "There's an error in the third section. The date is wrong." Elena's mind went blank. She couldn't process words, couldn't focus on anything except the scant inches between them and the way her body seemed to lean toward his of its own accord. Dante stepped back, expression unchanged, as if he hadn't just shattered her composure with a simple proximity. "Go home, Elena. That's an order." She gathered her things with trembling hands, hyper-aware of his gaze following her every movement. At the door she paused, some reckless part of her demanding acknowledgement of what had just happened. "Good night, Mr. Salvatore." "Dante." His voice stopped her. "When we're alone, call me Dante." Elena fled before she could do something foolish like ask what that meant, what he wanted, what this dangerous game between them was becoming. By the end of the week, Dante had her followed. Not because he didn't trust her. Elena was the only person in his world he trusted implicitly, which was itself remarkable and terrifying. But because the thought of her walking alone through dark streets, vulnerable to any random violence Milan's nights could offer, made something feral wake inside him. He told himself it was pragmatic. She knew details about his businesses, his schedule, his operations. Protecting her was protecting his interests. But lying to Marco was one thing. Lying to himself was proving more difficult. His men reported the same routine. She stopped at the same cafe each morning for a cappuccino and cornetto. Took the same route home through well-lit streets. Lived in a modest apartment in a decent neighborhood. No boyfriend. No late nights out. No danger. No one waiting for her. That last detail shouldn't have pleased him as much as it did. Dante started finding excuses to keep her late. Strategy meetings that didn't strictly need her input but where her insights proved valuable. Dinners with clients where he wanted her present, claiming she had better rapport with the wives than he did. Charity events where she stood beside him in elegant dresses he'd had delivered to her apartment anonymously. She never mentioned the dresses. Just appeared wearing them, the fabric cinched around curves that haunted his dreams, her curls styled in ways that made his chest tight with want. "You look beautiful," he'd said at one event, the words escaping before he could stop them. Elena had smiled, sad and knowing in a way that made him wonder what she saw when she looked at him. "Thank you, Mr. Salvatore." "Dante," he'd corrected quietly. "Dante," she'd repeated, and the sound of his name in her voice had nearly undone him. The formality was a wall between them, growing thinner but still present. He wanted to shatter it, wanted to pull her close and confess that she'd become an obsession, wanted to hear her say his name breathlessly while he stopped that line of thinking before it could consume him entirely. Dante Salvatore didn't lose control. Didn't want things he couldn't have. Didn't fall for anyone, let alone his assistant. But apparently he did now. The following Tuesday, a business associate named Luca Ferretti came to the penthouse. Luca was a distant cousin of Marco's, younger than Dante by several years, charming in the way of men who'd never built anything real but coasted on family connections and inherited wealth. He dealt in art acquisitions for the family's legitimate operations, a useful role that kept him involved without giving him real power. Dante tolerated him because Marco vouched for him. Nothing more. They were discussing a potential gallery purchase when Elena entered with coffee, moving with the quiet efficiency he'd come to anticipate. She set down the tray, smiled politely and turned to leave. Luca stood abruptly, all pretense of business abandoned. "And who is this vision?" His hand shot out to catch Elena's wrist, not forcefully but with presumed familiarity that made Dante's blood freeze in his veins. "Allow me to introduce myself properly. I'm Luca Ferretti and I absolutely must know your name." Elena's polite smile tightened fractionally, the only sign of discomfort. "Elena Marchetti. Mr. Salvatore's assistant." "Assistant." Luca's eyes traveled over her with open appreciation. "What a waste. A woman like you should be leaving." Dante's voice cut through the room like a blade, cold and absolute. "My assistant has work to attend to. Now." Elena extracted her wrist from Luca's grip and retreated, but not before Dante caught the flash of hurt in her eyes. As if he'd dismissed her. As if she were nothing more than an inconvenience. The thought made him want to put his fists through the glass coffee table. The meeting concluded in record time, Dante's responses growing increasingly curt until even Luca's oblivious charm couldn't miss the mounting tension. "You're in a mood," Luca observed as he gathered his things, too stupid to sense the genuine danger he was courting. Maybe you need to relax. There's a club opening tomorrow night I could arrange. Get out. Luca finally read the room, departing with uncharacteristic speed. Dante sat in the silence afterward, surrounded by luxury and power, utterly alone. The coffee Elena had brought sat untouched, growing cold, a small reminder of her presence and his failure. He'd hurt her to protect her from Luca's attention. But protection that caused pain wasn't protection at all. Later that evening, restless and unable to focus on work, Dante went looking for her. He found Elena in the archive room, filing documents with more force than strictly necessary. Her shoulders were rigid, her movements sharp, and when he entered she didn't acknowledge his presence. I shouldn't have dismissed you like that. Her hands stilled on the files, but she didn't turn around. You're my employer. You can dismiss me however you want. Elena. Mr. Salvatore. The formality was a wall again, rebuilt with impressive speed. Dante moved closer, every instinct screaming at him to close the distance, to explain, to make her understand. Look at me. She turned slowly, chin raised in defiance despite the tears threatening in her eyes. The sight of them, of her pain, hit him harder than any physical blow. What do you want from me? Her voice cracked on the question. You keep me late, you send me dresses, you look at me like... She stopped, shaking her head. And then you treat me like I'm nothing in front of others. So what do you want? Everything. The word thundered through him, primal and terrifying. Your mornings and your nights and every moment between. Your laughter and your tears and the way you look at me like I'm human instead of a monster. I don't know, he lied, because the truth would change everything and he wasn't ready for that apocalypse. Elena laughed, bitter and broken. Of course you don't. Men like you never do. She tried to move past him. His hand shot out, gripping the doorframe, caging her without touching her. The air between them crackled with tension, anger and hurt and want all tangled together. Men like me. His voice dropped to something dangerous. What does that mean? Powerful. Untouchable. You take what you want and destroy what you don't. She met his eyes, unflinching. You came home 3 nights ago with blood on your shirt cuff, Dante. I saw it before you changed. I know what you are. The confession hung between them, raw and honest. And yet you're still here. I'm still here, she agreed softly. Which probably makes me foolish. Because I think you'd break my heart without even noticing. Dante's hand moved from the doorframe to her face, thumb brushing her cheek with devastating gentleness. She inhaled sharply at the contact, eyes widening. Then you don't know me at all, he murmured. Because I notice everything about you. The way you take your coffee with too much sugar. How you bite your lip when you're concentrating. That you're afraid of thunderstorms but too proud to admit it. I notice, Elena. Every moment. Every detail. Why? The question was barely a whisper. Because I can't stop. The admission cost him something. Dante saw his own vulnerability reflected in her eyes, saw the moment she understood that this wasn't one-sided, wasn't just her heart at risk. His thumb traced her lower lip and Elena's breath hitched. Then he stepped back, breaking the spell before he did something irreversible. I should let you finish your work. He left before she could respond, before his control could shatter completely. The next morning Elena's desk was covered in white roses. 50 of them, perfect and pristine, filling the air with delicate fragrance. No card. No explanation. But when she looked up, Dante was watching from his office doorway, and the expression on his face told her everything she needed to know. They're beautiful, she said, touching the petals with trembling fingers. Like you. The words hung between them, simple and devastating. For once his mask had slipped completely, revealing raw want and something far more dangerous. Tenderness. Elena stood slowly, moving toward him as if drawn by invisible strings. This can't happen. It's already happening. You're my boss. She gestured helplessly at him, at the empire surrounding them. You're Dante Salvatore. You live in a world I don't understand, with rules I can't follow. Then I'll change the rules. You can't just... Watch me. Before she could protest further, Marco appeared with urgent news about a shipment. Dante's expression shuddered instantly, the vulnerable man replaced by the cold strategist. Get everyone to the war room. Now. As Marco departed and Dante began issuing orders in rapid Italian, Elena held a white rose and let herself imagine impossible things. A few days later the crisis escalated. A rival family had made a move on Dante's territory, subtle but unmistakable. 3 shipments intercepted. 2 warehouses burned. And worst of all, 2 of his men killed in what was made to look like random violence. But nothing in Dante's world was random. Retaliation was expected, necessary, swift. Elena watched him transform into someone terrifying. The businessman vanished, replaced by the cold commander his enemies feared. He gave orders that would end lives, orchestrated violence with the precision of a maestro conducting death. She should have been horrified. Should have run from this glimpse of his true nature. Had she stayed. She brought him coffee at 3 in the morning while he planned his counterstrike, watching the weight of command press down on shoulders that somehow seemed broader for carrying it. She organized files he needed, anticipated questions before he asked them, became an extension of his will in ways that transcended simple employment. You should go home, Dante said without looking up from maps and intelligence reports spread across his desk. This isn't something you need to see. I'm staying. Elena. I'm staying, she repeated more firmly. You don't get to send me away every time things get difficult. His eyes met hers finally, searching for judgment and finding only steady resolve. Something in his chest cracked open, warm and terrifying. This is who I am, he said quietly. The man who gives orders that end lives. The monster in expensive suits. You're not a monster. You're a man doing what he has to do to protect what's his. And what if you're what's mine? What then? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Then I'd say you better protect me well, Elena said softly. Because I'm not going anywhere. When the planning was done and Marco had taken a team to execute Dante's orders, Elena stood to leave. He caught her wrist gently, thumbs stroking over her racing pulse. Thank you. 2 words. A lifetime of loneliness behind them. Elena turned her hand in his, lacing their fingers together for one brief moment. Come back safe. Always. By the end of the week, the threat was neutralized. Dante's response had been surgical and brutal. 3 of the rival families' operations destroyed, their leadership forced to the negotiating table, terms dictated that left no question about who held power. He returned to the penthouse at dawn, exhausted but unharmed. And Elena was there. She'd let herself in with the key he'd given her months ago for emergencies, though they both knew it had been an excuse, a way of giving her access to his private space without acknowledging why that mattered. She'd made breakfast, toast and eggs and coffee. Simple, domestic, surreal in a space built for business and isolation. You didn't have to do this, Dante said, staring at the kitchen table set for 2. I wanted to. They ate in silence, but it was comfortable, companionable. The intimacy of the simple act was more profound than any words could capture. Afterward, Dante stood at the window watching dawn paint Milan in shades of gold and rose. Elena joined him, close enough that their shoulders touched. My father built this empire, he said quietly, voice rough with exhaustion. Before he died, he told me that power requires sacrifice. That love makes you weak, makes you vulnerable. That a man who cares about anything more than his family's legacy is a man who won't survive. Do you believe that? Dante was silent for a long moment, weighing decades of conditioning against something new and fragile growing in his chest. I did, he admitted. Until you. Elena's breath caught. Dante. He turned to face her, hands framing her face with trembling care. I want you, Elena. Not as my assistant. Not for one night. I want mornings like this and late nights working together. I want your laugh and your stubbornness and the way you look at me like I'm human instead of a weapon. You are human. With you I want to be. I want to be the man you deserve instead of the monster my father made me. She rose on her toes, hand cupping his jaw, feeling the rough stubble there. You're already that man. You just have to believe it. Then help me believe it. Stay with me. Not because I employ you but because you choose me. This is insane, Elena whispered even as her heart raced with terrified joy. You could have anyone. Models, socialites, women who understand your world. I want you. Only you. I'm scared. What if? I'm scared too, he interrupted softly. Terrified, actually. You've become the thing my father warned me about. Something I care about more than power, more than legacy, more than my own life. And I don't know what to do with that except tell you the truth. I'm falling in love with you, Elena Marchetti. I've been for months. And it's the most terrifying and beautiful thing I've ever experienced. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I'm falling in love with you too. Dante kissed her then, soft and sweet and trembling with restrained need. Elena's arms wrapped around his neck, pulling him closer, deepening the kiss until they were both breathless. When they finally broke apart, foreheads touching, Dante whispered, "Stay with me today. Let me show you what I can't say." "Yes." He swept her into his arms, carrying her toward his bedroom, toward a future neither had planned but both desperately wanted. What followed was hours of discovery. Dante worshipped Elena with patient devotion, learning every curve and hollow, every sound she made, every touch that made her gasp. He was reverent, almost worshipful, as if she were something precious he'd been given but didn't deserve. "You're beautiful," he murmured against her skin, mapping her body with kisses. "Perfect." "I'm not perfect. To me you are." Elena's hands explored the planes of his back, tracing old scars she'd wondered about, evidence of a life lived in violence, of survival bought with pain. She kissed each one, gentle acknowledgement of what he'd endured. When Dante finally moved over her, into her, their eyes locked with understanding that this changed everything. There was no going back from this moment, this connection. "I love you," he breathed against her lips. "I love you," she answered, and they moved together, finding rhythm and release in something that transcended the physical entirely. Afterward, wrapped in expensive sheets with dawn turning to morning outside, Dante held her close, fingers tracing idle patterns on her shoulder. "I want to do this right," he said quietly. "Court you properly. Take you to dinner, the opera, anywhere you want to go. Show Milan, show the world, that you're mine." "Dante, we should probably be careful." "Your position." "I don't care. I've spent 15 years being careful, being strategic, hiding everything real behind masks and power plays. I'm done hiding." "Not with you." Elena turned in his arms, studying his face. "Are you sure? Once we're public, there's no taking it back." "I've never been more certain of anything." She kissed him, sealing the promise, ignoring the small voice in her head warning that happiness this profound never lasted. The following weeks were a revelation. Dante courted her with the focus he brought to everything. Dinner reservations at impossible restaurants, weekend trips to Tuscany, quiet evenings where they talked until dawn about everything except the danger surrounding them. He learned she'd lost her parents in a car accident when she was 19, leaving her and Alessandro to fend for themselves. That she'd worked 3 jobs to put herself through university. That she'd built walls to protect herself from abandonment, from caring too much about anything she might lose. "I understand walls," Dante said one evening on the terrace of his Tuscan villa, watching sunset paint the hills gold. "I've lived behind them my entire life. Do you think we can learn to live without them? With you? I want to try." Elena learned that Dante cooked surprisingly well, a skill developed during rare childhood moments when his father wasn't home and the staff had evenings off. That he read poetry in the rare hours he couldn't sleep. Dante Petrarch, occasionally Pablo Neruda in translation. That his ruthlessness was armor protecting a capacity for devotion that terrified him. "My father used to test me," Dante admitted one night, voice distant with memory. "Put me in situations where I had to choose between compassion and power. Every time I chose compassion, he'd call it weakness and devise a harder test. Eventually, I learned to stop choosing compassion." "But you didn't stop feeling it." "No. I just got better at hiding it." Elena took his hand. "You don't have to hide with me." "I know. That's what scares me." They made love again that night, slow and tender, both of them shedding armor piece by piece. 3 weeks into their relationship, Dante took her to a Salvatore family gathering. It was carefully orchestrated. A Sunday dinner at his estate attended by Marco, a few trusted associates and their families. Casual enough to not raise alarms, formal enough to make a statement. Elena dressed carefully in a simple but elegant navy dress, her hair swept up, nervous in ways she hadn't been since her first day of work. "They'll love you," Dante assured her, adjusting his cufflinks in the mirror. "They'll wonder why you're dating your assistant. They'll see what I see. An intelligent, beautiful woman who makes me better than I am." She kissed him for that, long and deep, until he groaned against her lips. "We're already late." "Let them wait." "Dante." "Let them wait," he repeated, pulling her back into his arms. They arrived 20 minutes late, Elena's lips slightly swollen and Dante's careful composure entirely unrepentant. The evening went better than expected. Marco, who'd known about them for weeks, welcomed Elena warmly. The other men were respectful, their wives curious but kind. Children ran through the gardens while adults shared wine and conversation. Felt almost normal. Elena was helping one of the wives with dessert when she overheard two of Dante's associates talking in low voices. Bold move bringing her here. He's serious about her. Haven't seen him like this since, well, ever. Makes him vulnerable. Makes him human. Might not be a bad thing. Elena pretended not to hear, but the words settled in her chest like stones. Vulnerable. In Dante's world, vulnerability was weakness. And weakness got you killed. That night, lying in bed, she voiced her concerns. What happens when your enemies find out about me? Dante's arms tightened around her. They won't touch you. How can you know that? Because I'll make it clear that harming you means annihilation. Not retaliation, complete destruction. I'll burn their empires to the ground and salt the earth behind me. The vehemence in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it made her feel cherished in a way she'd never experienced. You'd start a war over me. Without hesitation. Elena kissed his jaw, his throat, feeling his pulse accelerate under her lips. I don't want you to have to. Then we'll be careful. But Elena. He pulled back to look at her. I won't hide you. Won't pretend you don't matter. The people who need to know will know. You're mine and I protect what's mine. Possessive. Obsessively so. She should have objected to being claimed like territory. Instead, warmth flooded through her, primal satisfaction at being wanted so completely. Then I suppose it's fair to say you're mine too. Dante's smile was rare and beautiful. Completely. A month later, Alessandro flew in from London for a surprise visit. Elena had been meaning to tell her brother about Dante but hadn't found the right words. How did you explain that you'd fallen in love with your boss, a man who controlled criminal enterprises while wearing bespoke suits? She didn't have to explain. Alessandro took one look at them together. The way Dante's hand rested on her lower back, the way Elena leaned into him unconsciously, and understood immediately. We need to talk, Alessandro said, his usual easy charm replaced by protective seriousness. Alone. Dante started to object, but Elena squeezed his hand. It's okay. He's my brother. They left Dante in the penthouse living room and retreated to the terrace. Alessandro rounded on her immediately. Dante Salvatore? Elena, do you have any idea who he is? What he does? I know exactly who he is. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you're dating one of Italy's most powerful criminals. The man has a body count, Elena. And he also has a heart, she said quietly. One he's given to me completely. Alessandro ran his hands through his hair, frustration evident. I've done research. The Salvatore family. I don't want to hear it. Not unless you have evidence he's hurt innocent people. Not unless you can show me he's the monster everyone claims. That's just it. There's no evidence. He's too smart, too careful. But the rumors are just rumors. Alessandro, I love him. And he loves me. That's all that matters. Her brother studied her for a long moment, seeing something that made his expression soften. You really love him. With everything I am. And he treats you well? Respects you? Better than I've ever been treated. Alessandro sighed, pulling her into a hug. Then I'll trust your judgment. But if he hurts you, I don't care how powerful he is. He won't. I promise. When they returned inside, Dante was exactly where they'd left him, staring out at Milan but clearly listening for their return. He stood when they entered, shoulders tense. Alessandro extended his hand. Hurt her and I'll find a way to make you regret it. Understood. Dante shook his hand firmly. Understood. But it won't be necessary. Good. Alessandro's expression lightened slightly. Now, I believe we were supposed to have dinner? I want to hear how exactly you convinced my impossibly stubborn sister to fall for you. The tension broke and Elena laughed, relief flooding through her. 2 weeks later, the photographs arrived. Dante was in a meeting with Calabrian suppliers, negotiating territory agreements, when Marco entered with an envelope. One look at his underboss's face told Dante everything he needed to know. Something was wrong. He excused himself, following Marco to a private office. The envelope contained surveillance photos. Elena leaving her apartment, having coffee at her usual cafe, walking through markets. Innocent activities made sinister by the red X marked over her face in each image. The message was clear. We can reach her anytime. Dante's blood turned to ice, then immediately to fire. Who? The Valentino family. They're demanding territory concessions in the south. Give them what they want or they'll kill her. Dante's voice was deadly calm, the kind of quiet that preceded massacres. Assemble everyone. War room. 15 minutes. Marco hesitated. Boss, maybe we should consider. I don't negotiate with terrorists. And anyone who threatens Elena Marchetti has just signed their death warrant. Within the hour, every key member of Dante's organization had gathered. He stood at the head of the conference table, every inch the ruthless commander his father had trained him to be. The Valentinos have made a fatal error in judgment, he said, his voice cutting through the tension. They believe Elena is my weakness. He placed the photographs on the table, letting his men see the threat. They're right. She is my weakness. But what they don't understand is that I will burn their entire bloodline to ash before I let them touch a single hair on her head. Marco leaned forward. We can hit 3 of their operations tonight, cripple their cash flow. No. Dante's voice brooked no argument. We don't cripple them. We end them completely. I want every Valentino asset identified. Every alliance, every business front, every safe house. We dismantle them so thoroughly that in 5 years, children won't remember their name ever existed. Silence fell. One of the older associates spoke carefully. Boss, that's total war. The kind that brings heat from the authorities, that makes other families nervous. I don't care. Anyone who stands with the Valentinos becomes my enemy. Anyone who remains neutral will be rewarded. But this ends one way, with Elena safe and the Valentinos destroyed. Another pause, then Marco stood. Then we're with you. All of us. One by one, the others pledged their support, understanding that their leader had just drawn a line in blood. That evening, Dante returned to the penthouse where Elena waited. She was curled on the sofa reading, looking peaceful and perfect, utterly unaware of the storm gathering around her. When she looked up and saw his face, the book slipped from her hands. What happened? He pulled her close, breathing in vanilla and warmth, memorizing the feel of her against him. There's a threat. A rival family making moves. How bad? Bad enough that I need you to trust me completely. Elena pulled back, studying his face. What are you planning? Tomorrow Marco is taking you to a secure location. One of my properties outside the city. Just for a few days while I handle this. No. Elena. No, Dante. We said we'd face things together. You don't get to ship me away the moment things get dangerous. These people sent surveillance photos of you with red X's over your face. They're threatening to kill you to get to me. The color drained from Elena's face, but her voice remained steady. Then we deal with them together. I can't protect you if... You can't protect me by sending me away either. If they've been watching me, they know where I go. Your safe house won't matter if they want to find me. I'm safer here with you, surrounded by your security. Every instinct screamed at him to lock her away, to remove her from the board entirely. But he'd promised honesty, promised partnership. You stay within these walls. Marco or one of my personal guards with you at all times. And if I say run, you run without question. Agreed. Dante kissed her fiercely, pouring fear and love and desperate need into the connection. That night he held her tighter than ever, memorizing every detail in case the worst happened. The next 72 hours were brutal. Dante's organization struck the Valentinos with surgical precision. Warehouses burned, money laundering operations exposed to authorities, key lieutenants arrested on carefully preserved evidence. It was systematic destruction, each move calculated to inflict maximum damage. Elena stayed in the penthouse, watching Dante transform into the commander his enemies feared. She saw him make decisions that would end lives, order actions that would destroy families, all with cold calculation. She should have been horrified. Instead, she understood that this was the price of his world. Violence met with violence, threats answered with overwhelming force. And she understood that he was doing this for her, to keep her safe. On the third day, Antonio Valentino himself requested a meeting. It's a trap, Marco said flatly, reviewing intelligence reports. Obviously. Dante checked his weapon with practiced ease. But it's also our chance to end this permanently. Let me go instead. No. This ends with me looking him in the eye. Elena appeared in the doorway, having overheard. Where are you going? He could have lied. Should have lied. But he'd promised her honesty. To meet with the man who threatened you. Her face paled, but her voice remained strong. Dante, no. It's the only way to guarantee your safety. To make sure he understands that you're untouchable. By getting yourself killed? Her voice rose, fear breaking through. That doesn't keep me safe, that destroys me. Dante crossed to her, framing her face with gentle hands. I won't die. I'm too selfish, I have too much to live for now. But I need to do this. Face to face, so there's no misunderstanding about what happens to people who threaten you. Promise me you'll come back. I promise, amore mio. I'll always come back to you. He kissed her thoroughly, like it might be the last time, then left before her tears could break his resolve. The meeting took place in an abandoned factory on the outskirts of Milan, neutral ground thick with tension and the smell of old machinery. Dante arrived with Marco and 6 of his best men. The Valentinos matched their numbers, led by Antonio Valentino himself, 70 years old with cold eyes that had seen decades of violence. Salvatore. Antonio's voice dripped contempt. You've made quite the mess of my operations. You threaten what's mine. This is me being restrained. The girl. Antonio laughed, sharp and ugly. You've gone soft. Your father would be ashamed. My father is dead. I'm not. Dante's voice dropped to something lethal. Here are your options. Leave Milan tonight with what's left of your organization intact, or stay and I'll finish what I started. Either way, Elena Marchetti is untouchable. Spread the word, anyone who harms her answers to me. And if we refuse? Then you'll learn why people truly fear the Salvatore name. The silence stretched taut. Antonio studied Dante, seeing the absolute truth in his eyes. This wasn't negotiation. This was a death sentence with one chance of reprieve. You'd start a war over a woman. I'd end the world over her. Something shifted in Antonio's expression. Recognition, perhaps even respect. He'd been young once, in love once, before decades of violence had calcified his heart. We'll leave, Antonio said finally. Tonight. But Salvatore, he leaned forward, voice dropping. That kind of love, in our world, makes you vulnerable. Someone will use it against you eventually. Let them try. The meeting concluded. Dante had won, but Antonio's words echoed as they departed. Elena was his greatest vulnerability now. And in a world built on exploiting weakness, that knowledge was a loaded gun pointed at both of them. He returned to the penthouse at dusk. Elena flew into his arms the moment he walked through the door, and Dante held her like she was oxygen and he'd been suffocating. It's over, he murmured against her hair. The Valentinos are leaving Milan. The threat is gone. You're safe. You came back. Always. But that night, watching Elena sleep peacefully beside him, Dante lay awake with Antonio's warning echoing. He'd won this battle, neutralized this threat. But the fundamental problem remained. As long as he lived in his world, Elena would be a target. And she deserved better than constantly looking over her shoulder. The next morning, Dante made a decision that would change everything. He called a meeting with his underbosses, his legal team, and his financial advisors. Elena found him hours later, surrounded by documents and serious faces. What's going on? Dante looked up and something in his expression made her heart stutter. I'm stepping back. Silence crashed through the room. Marco spoke carefully. Boss, what exactly do you mean by stepping back? I'm keeping the legitimate businesses. The hotels, the investments, the real estate holdings. But the rest, he gestured at maps and files representing his criminal empire. I'm distributing it among those who want it. Controlled transition over the next 6 months. You're leaving the family? One underboss asked, shocked. I'm choosing a different family. His eyes found Elena's across the room and everything else faded. She moved toward him slowly, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. You'd give this up? All of it? For me? In a heartbeat. Elena, I've spent 15 years building an empire that's brought me nothing but enemies and isolation. Power without purpose, wealth without joy. Then you walked into my life and suddenly I wanted mornings and normalcy and a future that didn't end in violence. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Dante. I want to marry you without wondering if it'll get you killed. I want children who don't grow up learning to check cars for bombs. I want to be just a man who loves you, not a criminal you're shackled to. You're not a criminal to me. You're the man who brought me coffee when I worked late, who learned I loved white roses and filled my office with them, who looks at me like I'm the only thing in the world that matters. You are the only thing that matters. Everything else, the power, the territory, the fear, It's all meaningless compared to you. Elena kissed him, tasting salt and devotion, pouring everything she felt into the connection. Around them, hard men who'd killed without hesitation looked away, giving them privacy. When they broke apart, Dante addressed the room. This isn't weakness. It's evolution. The Salvatore name will continue through legitimate channels. Anyone who wants out of the life has my blessing in severance. Anyone who stays follows the transition plan. Questions? Marco stood slowly. You're serious about this? Completely. Then I'm with you. Always have been, boss. Even if that means managing hotels instead of territories. One by one, the others pledged their loyalty, not to power or fear but to the man who'd proven loyalty ran both ways. The transition took months. Dante navigated complex negotiations, transferring power while ensuring his people were protected and provided for. It meant long days and longer nights, but Elena was beside him through it all. She watched him transform from crime lord to legitimate businessman with the same intensity he brought to everything. The ruthlessness remained, but now it was channeled into boardrooms and hostile takeovers rather than violence. Threats emerged. Families who saw the transition as weakness, old enemies sensing opportunity. Each time, Dante handled it with surgical precision, making it clear that stepping back didn't mean rolling over. You're still terrifying, Elena observed one evening after he'd verbally eviscerated a competitor trying to poach their hotel staff. Only to people who deserve it, Dante replied, pulling her into his lap. To you I'm a teddy bear. She laughed, the sound filling spaces that had been empty for too long. A teddy bear who just made a grown man cry in a business meeting. He was trying to steal from us. There are consequences. Elena kissed him, gentle and teasing. My fierce protector. Always. By autumn, the transformation was nearly complete. Dante Salvatore was now primarily known as a luxury hotel mogul, philanthropist, and investor. The whispers of his past remained, they always would, but they were fading into legend rather than current reality. And through it all, he courted Elena with devotion that bordered on worship. He'd take her to the opera, then for gelato at midnight while they walked through empty streets. They'd spend weekends at his villa in Tuscany, cooking together and making love in sunlight that poured through ancient windows. He'd surprise her with trips to Paris, Barcelona, Vienna, anywhere she mentioned wanting to see. You're spoiling me, she said once, wrapped in cashmere on a terrace overlooking Lake Como, autumn colors painting the hills in gold and crimson. That's the plan. I don't need all this, you know. The trips, the gifts, the grand gestures. Dante pulled her closer, his voice soft against her ear. I know you don't need them, but I spent so many years believing I'd never have this. Someone to spoil, to build a life with, to love without fear. Let me enjoy it. Elena turned in his arms, studying the face she'd memorized in 1,000 different lights. The sharp jaw, dark eyes that softened only for her, the rare smile that made her heart skip every single time. I love you. I love you more. Impossible. Watch me prove it. He carried her inside, demonstrating his love with patient devotion that left them both breathless and laughing and tangled together until dawn. On a cold December evening, Dante took Elena to dinner at an exclusive restaurant overlooking the Duomo. They'd been together nearly a year now, weathering threats and transitions, building something real from the ashes of his old life. Elena wore emerald green silk that matched her eyes, and Dante couldn't stop staring at her across the candlelight. You're quiet tonight, she observed. Just thinking about how lucky I am. Dante Salvatore admitting to luck? Who are you and what have you done with my cynical boyfriend? He laughed, the sound genuine and warm. You've corrupted me. Made me believe in impossible things. Like what? Like happy endings. Something in his tone made Elena's pulse quicken. Before she could respond, Dante stood and moved around the table. Then, to her absolute shock, he dropped to one knee. The restaurant fell silent. Elena Marchetti, Dante said, producing a velvet box. You walked into my life when I'd convinced myself I didn't deserve happiness. You saw past the monster everyone else feared and found the man I'd forgotten existed. You stayed when you should have run. You loved me when I didn't know how to love myself. Tears streamed down Elena's face as he opened the box, revealing a stunning ring, a perfect diamond surrounded by emeralds. I don't deserve you. I'll probably never deserve you. But if you'll have me, I promise to spend every day of the rest of my life trying. Marry me, Elena. Let me be yours completely. Let me prove that love can transform even the darkest of us. Yes, she whispered. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. Dante slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then pulled her into his arms as the restaurant erupted in applause. He kissed her like she was air and he'd been drowning, pouring years of loneliness and hope and desperate love into the connection. I love you, he murmured against her lips. I love you too. So much it terrifies me. Good. We'll be terrified together. They were married 3 months later in a small ceremony in Positano. The location was perfect. A private villa overlooking the Amalfi Coast, intimate and beautiful. Alessandro walked Elena down the aisle, tears in his eyes as he gave his sister to a man who'd moved heaven and earth to deserve her. Dante stood at the altar in midnight blue, and when Elena appeared in simple ivory silk that flowed like water, his composure cracked completely. Tears tracked down his face unashamedly. You're so beautiful, he whispered when she reached him, voice thick with emotion. You're not so bad yourself. The ceremony was brief, officiated by a local priest who'd known Dante's grandmother. When he declared them married, Dante kissed Elena with such reverence that several guests openly wept. The reception lasted until dawn. Good food, better wine, dancing under string lights. Marco gave a speech about loyalty and transformation that had everyone laughing and crying. Alessandro welcomed Dante to the family with surprising warmth, threatening him with creative violence if he ever hurt Elena. But the most memorable moment came when Dante pulled Elena onto the dance floor alone, the crowd parting instinctively. Thank you, he murmured as they swayed to soft music. For what? For seeing who I could be instead of just who I was. For staying when I gave you every reason to run. For believing I deserved redemption when I didn't believe it myself. For loving me when I didn't know how to love myself. You taught me things too. That walls can come down without the world ending. That trust is built in actions, not words. That real love is choosing someone every day even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. They kissed as stars wheeled overhead, and for the first time in his life, Dante felt truly free from his past. 6 months later, Elena discovered she was pregnant. She'd suspected for weeks but waited until she was certain, wanting the moment to be perfect. She planned an elaborate reveal, complete with props and presentations, then abandoned it all in favor of simplicity. Dante came home from a meeting to find her sitting on their terrace, holding a small wrapped box. What's this? Open it. Inside was a positive pregnancy test and a note in her handwriting. Our greatest adventure starts in 7 months. Dante stared at it for a long moment, processing. Then his eyes found hers, wide and wondering and wet with tears. You're pregnant. We're pregnant. He dropped to his knees, pulling her into his arms, face buried against her still flat stomach. His shoulders shook with sobs, joy and fear and overwhelming love all tangled together. I'm going to be a father. The best father. Elena ran her fingers through his hair. Our baby is so lucky to have you. I don't know how to do this, he admitted, voice muffled. I don't know how to be a father. Mine was. You'll be nothing like him. You'll be everything he wasn't, present, loving, protective in all the right ways. I know it. Dante looked up at her, face wet with tears, and smiled, bright and unguarded and completely happy. I'm going to love this child so much they'll be sick of it. Impossible. Watch me. The pregnancy transformed him in ways Elena hadn't anticipated. Dante became obsessively protective, researching everything from prenatal vitamins to nursery safety with the same intensity he'd once brought to criminal enterprises. He accompanied her to every doctor's appointment, holding her hand and asking questions that made the doctors laugh fondly. He talked to Elena's growing belly every night, telling their daughter they'd learned she was a girl at 20 weeks, stories about her mother's courage and beauty. She's going to be just like you, Dante said one night, hands splayed over Elena's stomach, feeling their daughter kick. Smart and strong and impossible not to love. She might be like you too. Stubborn and protective and secretly soft inside. God help us if she inherits my stubbornness and your independence. Elena laughed, the sound filling their bedroom. We'll be outnumbered before she can walk. I can't wait. As Elena's belly grew, Dante's devotion intensified. He converted an entire wing of their home into a child's paradise. Soft colors, the best furniture, every safety feature imaginable. But more importantly, he read every parenting book he could find, attended every class, and confronted his own childhood demons to ensure history didn't repeat. "I won't be like my father," he told Elena late one night, the fear finally surfacing. "I won't raise her in violence and fear. I won't make her afraid of her own father." "You won't. Dante, you're already a better father than you give yourself credit for." "How do you know?" "Because you love her already. Completely. You talk to her every night, you've read 17 books on infant development, and you cried when you felt her kick for the first time. That's not the behavior of a man who'll repeat his father's mistakes. I want to give her everything. Safety, love, freedom to be whoever she wants to be." "You will. We both will." Labor came 3 weeks early on a rain-soaked Tuesday in March. Dante remained remarkably calm through the drive to the hospital, then promptly fell apart once they were admitted. He held Elena's hand through every contraction, whispering encouragement and apologies and promises. "I love you," he said for the 100th time. "You're so strong. So incredible. I'm in awe of you." "Tell me that in an hour," Elena gasped between contractions. "I'll tell you every day for the rest of our lives." Despite the pain, despite the fear, Elena had never felt more certain. This was right. This life they'd built from ashes and obsession and unexpected love. At 3:47 a.m. Isabella Rose Salvatore entered the world screaming her displeasure at the cold and brightness. The doctor placed her on Elena's chest and time stopped. She was perfect, dark wisps of hair already visible, tiny fists waving, her father's nose unmistakable even on such a small face. Dante stared at his daughter with wonder bordering on worship, tears streaming unchecked. "She's real. She's really here. Want to hold her?" He accepted Isabella with trembling hands, cradling her like she might shatter. More tears fell as he studied every perfect detail. 10 fingers, 10 toes, lungs that worked remarkably well judging by her continued protests. "Hello, Piccola," he whispered, voice breaking. "I'm your papa. And I promise I'll spend every day of my life making sure you know you're loved. You'll never doubt it, never fear it. You're safe, you're precious, and you're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Well, second most beautiful. Your mama holds that title." Isabella yawned, unimpressed by the speech, and Elena laughed through exhausted tears. She has no idea she just conquered the most powerful man in Milan. "Former most powerful man," Dante corrected softly. "Now I'm just a father who's hopelessly in love with his girls." They brought Isabella home 3 days later to a house transformed by love. Flowers filled every room, gifts from friends, family, business associates who'd watched Dante's transformation with bemused respect. Marco had organized a security detail that Dante immediately tripled, unwilling to take chances with his daughter's safety. But it was the quiet moments Dante treasured most. Late-night feedings where he'd hold Isabella and tell her stories about her mother's courage. Early mornings watching Elena nurse their daughter while sunlight painted them gold. The way Isabella would grip his finger with surprising strength, as if claiming him as thoroughly as he'd claimed her. "I never knew I could feel like this," Dante admitted one night, Isabella sleeping on his chest while he sat in the nursery rocker. "Like my heart exists outside my body. Like I'd burn the world down to keep her safe." Elena curled against his side, both of them watching their daughter sleep. That's parenthood. And marriage. You give your heart away and trust it'll be treasured. You've treasured mine better than I ever did. And you've treasured mine. That's what love is, Dante. Mutual treasuring. Mutual choosing. Every single day. He kissed her softly, carefully, mindful of their sleeping daughter. "I'd do it all again. Every violent year, every mistake, every moment of loneliness. Because it all led here to you, to her, to this impossible happiness I don't deserve but will fight to keep. You deserve every bit of it. Only because you believe it." 5 years later, Dante stood in his office. Legitimate office. No maps of territories or weapons hidden in drawers. Reviewing expansion plans for their hotel chain. They'd grown the business significantly, opening properties in Rome, Venice, and Barcelona. Dante had proven as ruthless in legitimate business as he'd been in criminal enterprises, just without the bloodshed. Elena appeared in the doorway, their daughter Isabella clinging to her leg. She was 5 now, a whirlwind of energy and questions with her mother's curls and her father's intensity. "Papa." Isabella launched herself at him and Dante caught her easily, spinning her around until she shrieked with laughter. "How's my principessa? I drew you a picture." She thrust a crayon masterpiece at him, Stick figures labeled Papa, Mama, and me, surrounded by hearts and what might have been horses or possibly very strange dogs. It's beautiful. Absolutely museum quality. We'll hang it in the office. Next to all my others? Next to all your others. The most important art collection in Milan. Isabella beamed, satisfied, then wriggled down to explore the office. Elena smiled watching them. This was the future they'd fought for, ordinary and extraordinary, built on ashes of what was and hope for what could be. She asked me today if you were a superhero, Elena said softly. What did you tell her? That you were better. You were a man who chose to be good even when being bad would have been easier. Dante's throat tightened. I'm not sure I was ever bad. Just lost. And now you're found. He pulled Elena close, pressing a kiss to her temple while their daughter colored at his desk. I'm home. That's what you are, home. Both of you. That evening, after Isabella was asleep, Dante and Elena sat on their terrace overlooking Milan. The city glittered below, full of memories and ghosts. Somewhere down there, Dante's old life still existed. The families, the territories, the endless cycle of violence and power. But it felt distant now, like something that had happened to someone else. Do you ever miss it? Elena asked, reading his mind as she so often did. The power, the fear, the absolute control? Dante considered, really thought about it. Sometimes I miss the certainty. The simplicity of clear enemies and clearer solutions. But this, he gestured at their home, their life, the sleeping daughter upstairs. This is worth more than any empire. Isabella laughed today when I chased her through the garden. You sang while cooking dinner. Those moments are my power now. You've changed so much. You changed me. Showed me there was another way to be strong, through vulnerability, through love, through choosing light over darkness every single day. Elena leaned against him, perfectly content. I'm proud of you. Of us. Of what we've built. I'm proud of us too. We took something that should have been impossible. A criminal and his assistant, a man raised in violence falling in love with a woman who deserved better, and we made it beautiful. It was always going to be beautiful. From the moment you looked at me in that ballroom and felt something you couldn't control. Dante laughed softly. That terrified me. I know. Terrified me too. But we did it anyway. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their city, holding each other, knowing they'd found something rare and precious. Love that conquered fear, love that conquered power, love that transformed monsters into men and built futures from rubble. Dante had once ruled through violence and fear, commanding an empire built on blood and darkness. Now he ruled a much smaller kingdom, two hearts that beat in sync with his own, a home filled with laughter instead of tension, a future bright with possibility. And he'd never been more powerful. The man who'd believed himself incapable of love had become love itself. Devoted husband, protective father, proof that redemption wasn't just possible but inevitable when you found the right person to believe in you. Elena had seen the man beneath the monster. And in seeing him, in loving him despite everything, she'd saved him from the darkness he'd thought was his destiny. Thank you, Dante whispered into the Milan night. For what? For everything. For staying. For loving me. For giving me a family I didn't know I wanted and a life I didn't know was possible. You gave me the same thing. Then we're even. Never, Elena said, kissing him softly. I'll always love you more. Impossible. But I'll enjoy watching you try to prove it for the next 50 years. They stayed on the terrace until the city lights began to dim with approaching dawn, two people who'd found each other against impossible odds and built something that would last forever. The end. True strength isn't found in how much power you hold over others, but in how much courage you have to be vulnerable with the one person who sees all of you, your past, your flaws, your fears, and chooses to stay anyway. Love doesn't erase our history, but it can transform our future into something more beautiful than we ever imagined possible. The greatest act of bravery is allowing someone to love you completely, walls down, heart open, trusting they'll treasure what you've given them. May you find someone who makes you want to be better, and may you have the courage to let them in, to let them love you, to let yourself become the person they see when they look at you with eyes full of hope and devotion. Please like, share, and subscribe.